Hello student, welcome back. Today I Dinesh Strotila is here to explain about Archimedes principle. My dear students, let's start. Archimedes gives the principle related to liquid and buoyant force. According to Archimedes principle, law of physics states that when an object is totally or partially immersed in a liquid or fluid, it experiences an upthrust equal to the weight of the displaced water. The principle is mostly frequently applied to the behavior of objects in water and help us to explain how any objects sink and how any objects float in the liquid. Dear students, in our daily life we can experience upthrust force. Upthrust is such type of force which acts in upward direction whenever we put or immerse any objects in the liquid. Now you can look in this figure and definition of upthrust is given. And dear student, upthrust which refers to the force acting upward to reduce the actual weight of the objects. This is the definition and this is the figures and diagrams to understand about upthrust. Whenever we immerse partially or fully any objects in the liquid, this is the objects we are pushing inside the liquid, it experiences a force which we feel in upward direction. So dear students, you have to remember upthrust means which refers to the force acting upward to reduce the actual weight of the objects. Whenever we immerse any objects in the liquid, it experiences a forces in upward direction that is acts in always upward direction whenever we immerse any objects in the liquid. Dear students, with the help of buoyant force, Archimedes gives principles which we are using as Archimedes principle. It means that Archimedes explains about the law that when we immerse partially or fully any objects in the liquid, it experiences a force that is buoyant force, and buoyant force is always equal to the water displaced by the object. So now dear students, we will discuss how many objects float and how many objects sink in the liquids. We can easily understand about these topics with the help of buoyant force, and now you can write in your copies and you can understand with the help of this. If buoyant force is equal to the weight of the objects, dear students, there are three conditions we can easily understand by the buoyant force. We have understood that buoyant force is equal to the water displaced by the objects. How much water object displaces, weight of that is always equal to the buoyant force which acts in upward direction. Dear students, if buoyant force and weight of the object are equal, then the object floats and stationary. Not, it means that then object not on the top and in the bottom, just in middle, or we can assume that half parts of the objects in middle and half part above the liquids. In this case, objects floats and stationary. Second case is given. Now you have to understand, second case is this: if buoyant force is greater than weight of the object, it means that force which acting in upward direction is greater than the weight of the object. In this case, the object moves up and floats just on the top of the surface. And if buoyant force is less than weight of the object, in this case the object moves down and sinks. There are three terms related to buoyant force. Dear students, you have to understand how many objects floats on the top of the surface, how many objects sink in the bottom, how many objects floats and stationary. In that case, object not just on the top and not in the bottom, but object remains in just mid, just mid of the water and floats and remains stationary. You can assume that there are three terms related to buoyant force. When buoyant force is equal to the weight of the object, in that case object floats and stationary. When buoyant force is greater than the weight of the object, then the object moves up and floats just on the top of the surface. If buoyant force is less than weight of the object, then the object moves down and sink. The law of flotation is given. Now you can understand with the help of examples. My dear students, look at here and try to understand very easily. Floating object displaces its own weight of the fluid in which it floats. All the objects which floats displaces its own weight, and it can easily float in the liquid. And next examples, dear students, this is mass of the ship plus cargo is equal to the mass of the water displaced. Dear students, you are looking this example. In this case, half object inside the liquid and half is top of the liquids. It means that weight of the object and buoyant force is equal. When weight of the object and buoyant force remains equal, then objects floats and remains stationary. These are the terms related to Archimedes principle. Dear students, you have to understand. You can understand with several examples how any plastic balls just float on the surface of the liquid, how any iron nails sink in the bottoms of the liquids, and how ships, half part of ship and how ship just float on the liquids, how boat floats on the liquids. It means that buoyant force and weight of the objects are responsible for this condition. If buoyant force is greater than weight of the objects, then objects just float on the surface of the liquid. If buoyant force is less than weight of the object, in that case objects sink in the bottom. Yes student, these are very important, and this is important topic of Archimedes principle. With the help of this, you can understand how many objects sink and how many objects float on the surface of the liquid, and how many objects just remains stationary and half parts of the objects remains in the liquid. It means that total object does not sink totally and does not float totally. It means in this case neither object remains at bottom nor on the top. So dear student, this is Archimedes principle. You have to revise at your home and try to understand topics related to Archimedes principle. What is the meaning of Archimedes principle and what is the means of upthrust and buoyant force? Dear students, try to understand and take several examples for your better understanding. Thank you.